So, age verification in VR chat. Yeah, it's finally happening. Actual age verification in VR chat. Now, a lot of people think that this is an absolute necessity and has been a long time coming. And I think there may be a lot of truth to that. But as someone who believes strongly in the concept of freedom and the rights of the individual, I'm always leery of any sort of top down controlled infrastructure. So, hi, I'm Kinetic, and today we'll be exploring age verification in VR chat. So, who is this protecting? Well, I think the idea is that it's supposed to protect the kids. However, when I look at the details, it looks more like this is going to protect the adults. It's going to keep the kids out of the adults only areas, but it's not going to do anything to keep the predators out of the kids areas. This move does nothing to address that issue, which is ironic because I think that that was the original intent for this sort of thing. Or was it? It's effectively creating an adults only zone, which I actually like the idea of. When I socialize in VR, I always go to places that age verify at the door. Now, up until now, age verification has always been a bit lacking, but at least it's been an attempt. Now, age verification is going to be a lot more realistic, which means I won't have to listen to a bunch of tweens running around screaming the N word at each other, which is kind of my point. So, if you think that this is going to keep the kids from seeing NSFW things or from hearing the N word, no, the opposite is true. It's simply going to quarantine all of the squeakers to one area where they will be surrounded by other squeakers all running around screaming the N word at each other because that's what they do. It's not going to change what they hear or experience, it's simply going to create a small slice of VR where they're not able to go. Which may be a valuable point, I suppose, but it's not going to protect them and offer them some sort of safe, wholesome experience. Far from it. It will create a squeaker quarantine. And let me tell you, that squeaker quarantine will be far from wholesome. However, it will make a more comfortable environment for the adults, people who want to go onto VR chat to meet people and have interesting conversations. You see, an age verified world or event won't necessarily be a place where everyone's walking around with their NSFW hanging out. It may be a place where people can go and have a conversation and won't have to deal with someone screaming the N word at them or having to deal with some tween Rizzler throwing sexual slurs just because they hear a woman's voice and don't know any other way to communicate. It has the potential to make VR a more comfortable place for the grown-ups, but as I said, I'm always leery of any sort of top-down controlled infrastructure of that kind. It's a private club, Kinetic. They have the right to check ID at the door if they want to. Yeah, that's true. Just like a regular bar checks your ID at the door. So I guess that makes a lot of sense to me. And you know what? I suppose I do like the idea. Honestly, I think I'm sold. But now comes the hard part. Hey, Kinetic, let me have a scan of your ID. Wait, what? I ain't showing you shit. Yeah, you see, that's the hard part. That's where the rubber meets the road on this one. You have to scan them your actual ID. It's not VR chat that gets your ID, it's Persona who actually age verifies for VR chat. So, VR chat isn't actually getting your ID, instead, Persona gets it, as if that's any better. At least when I go to a regular bar, the bouncer just takes a quick look at my ID and then hands it back to me. He doesn't get to take a copy of it home with him, which is effectively what Persona is going to be able to do. And by the way, VR chat offers very little information on what Persona will be allowed to do with your information once they have it. VR chat gets to say, hey man, we only see your age and that's it. But they make no stipulation on what Persona will be allowed to do with your ID once they have it. And I could find no relevant privacy policy regarding Persona's VR chat collected IDs. I think if VR chat wants to implement this age verification, then they're going to have to offer more information on what their ID collector is going to be allowed to do with your information. They can't lecture us about trust and then simply wash their hands of any and all responsibility of what's going to happen with our ID once we send it in. I think that VR chat needs to have shared responsibility for what happens with our information and ID that we send in, including legal responsibility as well as liability in cases where the information is wrongfully used. In other words, if our ID is stolen or wrongfully used when we send it into Persona, then VR chat is going to have to accept some sort of legal liability for that, just like the IRL bar would have to do if it was found out that their bouncer was at the door snapping pics of IDs and using that data illegally. The bar that employed that bouncer would be on the hook, legally speaking. And I think that any relationship between VR chat and their age verification service, such as Persona, needs to be viewed in that same sort of way. Now, that sounds like a lot to worry about, but all in all, I think that this is potentially a good idea if done right. But who knows how many ways it may go wrong? The law of unintended consequences is a bitch. Now, as anyone who watches my content knows, my material revolves around virtual reality and how VR and IRL mirror each other. And I can tell you that age verification has always been a part of my IRL reality for as long as I've known it. I can't tell you how many times in my life I've been carded in IRL, so I'm really not that surprised to see its necessity showing up in VR also. I suppose this is yet another example of how VR continues to mirror IRL, which is an interesting point. Perhaps it was inevitable. I'd be really interested to hear what other people think about this, so let me know in the comments below. But a warning, keep it respectful. This is not a contest for who can throw the most unbased accusations at anyone else who doesn't share the same opinion that they have. Let's use our critical thinking skills and analyze how this is going to affect the VR community. Will this actually protect anyone, or is it just a feel-good measure? Will there be any unintended consequences, and if so, what might they be? So yeah, let me know what you think. Anyways, I want to thank you for joining me. I am Kinetic, and I will see you next time.